Hello and welcome again, and thank you for joining me as we continue our look at the book of Proverbs. We're going to pick up today in chapter 7. We left off at the end of chapter 23, verse 23. We're going to pick it up in verse 24 today, but before I get to that, something else I need to speak to. Last week I was wearing this t-shirt again, so don't think that I haven't bathed in a week. But I forgot to mention it because it was given to me by a friend, and so he makes them, and they're pretty cool. And I really particularly like this t-shirt because it has a front pocket on it and it has a cross, and the cross is made of 2 nails, and then it's got a really cool graphic on the back of the Passion of Christ. You remember that scene of him being nailed to the cross. Pretty cool t-shirt. Tony, you did a great job. I appreciate the gift, and so I apologized last week that I didn't make any mention of it, so there you go. But let's move on to talking about the book of Proverbs here as we reflect upon the message here. As you've noted, if you've been with us at all, that really these are rules for living a successful life. It doesn't mean that if you do the things, you'll never have any challenges or difficulties, but it does really kind of strongly suggest that you have access to insight and wisdom that can teach you how to understand your circumstance, how to respond to it in a positive way. Because if you're a follower of Christ, I hope that you're carrying the conviction in your life that God is working all things together for your good, that He is not the cause of bad things. Sometimes that's just simply part of living in a broken, fallen world, kind of like people who get caught up in weather disasters and lose their lives and properties and things of that nature. It's like the question the disciples asked Jesus, what was the reason this man was born blind? Was it his sin or his parents' sin? And Jesus said, neither. So there are things that happen to us in life that are not the direct causation of God. They're the things that happen because we live in a broken world, a world that's been damaged because of sin that has affected us not only spiritually, but it has affected us mentally and physically, even genetically, I could say, has caused a deterioration of the human being. And as a consequence, we suffer things sometimes, not because of the wrong that we've done, but just simply the wrong molecules lined up in the wrong way in our lives. I mean, some of you know I have a couple of hereditary things that nothing really terribly serious that can't be managed, but they're part of the structure of my day-to-day life. I have to give attention to these things every day unless I want them to become more irritating and annoying than they have to be. But not my parents' fault. They got it from someplace else. And it certainly, unfortunately, I probably passed it on to my children as well, at least some of them. Saying all that to say, there's going to be hardships and difficulties. Jesus said, in this world, you're going to have troubling times. But he says, don't despair. Don't become depressed. He says, for I have overcome the world. And so that's the thing I think that's most important, is we realize that living in a damaged world, we're subject to some of the damage of that damaged world. But one day we will shed this world and we will enter into His perfect world, and we will be free from the annoying things. And I think in a way that's part of the plan of God, because if we were perfectly content and everything was going perfectly wonderfully in our lives in this world, we wouldn't yearn for the next one. We would find ourselves really kind of dragging our feet and kicking and screaming when God wanted to call us home to be with Him. And so it's one of those things I find that oftentimes when people are taken by the Lord, either it happens in such a sudden way, they before they have a chance to blink, they open their eyes in heaven, or it happens in a way in which they see it coming and they prepare their hearts and they embrace it and are just thankful to be free from the pain that often comes with the hardships and diseases we face in this world. But we have here also not only rules for making right decisions, we have warnings against making bad decisions. In fact, in verse 24, he says, now then, my son, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways. He's talking about the immoral person, the seductress, whoever or however they might want to do it. It's not limited to just sexual immorality. There's all sorts of immorality that we can be seduced and drawn into. But he says, don't pay attention to it. Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her paths. Many are victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. I mean, in other words, there's a lot of them. And her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. Now, there's some really fascinating things that he has in this warning. And the very first thing he said is already something we touched about before, but it's certainly worth reiterating, that oftentimes bad decisions as well as good decisions are the result of having made a decision. I mean, that's what's implied by the word decision. You made a choice. There was a left and there was a right. Maybe there's even a middle ground. You looked at door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, and even when you knew what was behind the door many times, you chose that door because you didn't really foresee the long-term implications of that choice. I think it's like a lot of things. Like, for example, when people get over their head in debt, they're so anxious to get the money or the item that they were able to get, but it's by the third or fourth payment you begin to wonder, was this really the best decision for me? At least that was the way I felt the first time I bought a new car. I mean, when you first get in it, you're all excited and the smell is great and everything works and it's new and you feel good about yourself. In fact, you kind of fantasize that you look really good in it. But after the third or fourth payment and you realize it's really taking a hit on your budget, you really sit back and go, man, I should have bought used, or maybe I could have got a different rate, or well, I could have bought something that was just basic transportation, but instead I had to have this. I tell you that when you go through that process, you start really rethinking what you're doing. And that's why, my wife and I are really thankful not to have house payments or car payments. I mean, we don't drive enough anymore, but the same thing is it's nice not to have that burden. And I know a lot of you aren't in that situation, but if you take that kind of concept, just the concept, I'm not condemning you because you have a debt, but if you take that concept and you apply it to other areas of your life where you have become emotionally, mentally, psychologically, relationally indebted to a place where the cost is pretty high and you're beginning to really strain under the pressure, you have to understand that you got there in part because you decided to go there. And you didn't see the whole story. And that's something we'll talk about probably tomorrow, where part of wisdom and part of success in life is having enough experience, enough knowledge to be able to foresee where certain things are leading and make a decision to turn away from it. And this is the very thing that Solomon's saying. He says, look where people who follow this path end up. What's the final conclusion? My pastor used to always say that with regards to doctrine. He said, when you hear a new doctrine, a new theology, a new teaching, and it sounds very engaging and interesting, he says what you need to do is very logically take that concept and then really kind of live it out in your mind where it will lead you, what that concept, how it will affect your decision-making process. And over time, what you'll find is it will lead you either to a place of growth and blessing or a place of disappointment and even spiritual fatigue and a loss of faith. So it's really important to really be able to consider the ends of a matter, to be really not just nearsighted, as Peter warns us about being, but rather being farsighted as well. I mean, it's important to be able to see things that are near to you, but it's also important to see what's way down the road. And there are some things that just are very clear, and you can find even from Scripture that you don't have to vicariously or personally go through the experience to realize they're a dead end. But basically, you can read the Word of God and say, God very clearly shows me that this is a bad choice and it won't work out well. And so, for example, when you look at somebody like Achan who stole what wasn't his, or you look at David who committed adultery, these are examples of people who made bad choices that God very clearly said, thou shalt not. And it had disastrous implications for their lives. Disastrous. I mean, really, it destroyed literally Achan's life and his family. It really destroyed David's kingdom and left it with a mark on it, plus 4 dead children in the wake of it. And so you look at that and say, I don't have to do those things in order to know it's not a good idea. I need to just simply listen to what God says. Because one of the things that Jesus said in John 8, he says, very truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. And that's the whole idea. Aristotle put it this way, whatever you do habitually becomes normal. In other words, habitual behavior may be wrong behavior, but it will become normalized behavior over time. And that's why you look at people who live lives that you could consider to be a long set of very destructive choices, and you realize they do it day in and day out because it's habitual, and they therefore think it's natural. But the reality is it's destructive. And that's why one of the exhortations that Paul gave to us in Romans 6, he said, we know that our old man, that is the person I used to be, was crucified with him, with Christ, so that the body of sin would no longer dominate us, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. You are the slaves of the one you obey. And so when we come to making choices and decisions in our life, we need to keep in mind, my decision, is it based upon simply a passion, a desire, I want that I have, or is it based upon the leadership of God in my life? Because at the end of the day, are my actions in many ways in obedience to Christ? Now, I know that can become complicated, but it's also very important, and most important things do have a tendency to become complicated. The simple basis is that I make decisions in faith. I don't always know whether it's going to be the best result, but I'm saying, God, help me to make the right decision, the best decision. And I have found in my experience, when I'm heading in the wrong direction with a good heart, he stops me. And when I'm heading in the wrong direction with a bad heart, he lets me go until I reap the consequences. So, again, this is a lot about following the leadership of God in your life, but time's way over, and I'll continue this tomorrow. God bless you and go in his grace.